who's in Brussels. Lucy, thanks very much indeed for joining us. I suppose the United States is busy trying to get as many people on side, and if we're going to take what the US Secretary of State said this past few days, he's not very impressed with the cautious approach that Europe is taking at the moment.
Yes, we're seeing some really quite moderate language being used by European leaders here on the continent, something that has, as you say, disappointed the US Secretary of State. We've had calls almost unanimously, even from Russia, for de-escalation, for powers to work together using diplomacy to reduce tensions and prevent a further major conflict. And that's certainly one of the many reasons why Chancellor Angela Merkel is travelling to Moscow to visit her Russian counterpart, President Putin, on Saturday. On the table there, lots to talk about. Of course, the developing situation in Iran and Iraq, but also escalating crisis in Libya, as well as continuing problems in Syria, as well as the Ukraine. There is a shared ground between Chancellor Merkel and President Putin. Both have a desire for tensions to de-escalate. They also both have a desire to protect the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. Certainly, Russia has indicated that it continues to see that as a global asset. It will too, along with other European leaders, be working to protect what remains of that agreement. Certainly, that will be on the table when those two powers meet this weekend.
All right, so Europe, I suppose, with the British Foreign Secretary meeting his counterparts in the EU, are probably wanting to come with a common standpoint with this. Is there any indication that this joint position will then be taken to the US?
I think we haven't had a huge amount of detail about the discussions that are going on between the European powers and the US. There seems to be a lot going on behind the scenes. Certainly, we had that press conference with NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg yesterday, where he gave very little information about what exactly was being said. He said that there had been new information presented to the alliance over the course of the last few days about that operation, but it was clear that that was a unilateral decision, a US decision to undertake this drone strike that killed General Soleimani. He would not be drawn, Jens Stoltenberg, the Secretary General, on any specific criticism of that US action, but certainly we can tell there is nuanced language being used, but certainly European powers are working to de-escalate the situation, to use more moderate language than perhaps we're getting from the US, but there are no public spats at the moment. Clearly, there is a shared criticism of the activities of Iran in the Middle East, of the presence of Iranian-backed militia in the region, of its recent destabilizing activities, but there hasn't been any public criticism specifically directed at the US. But certainly the EU powers are working to present a coordinated front at the moment.
So Boris Johnson, again, also, I mean, he's seen as perhaps Donald Trump's biggest mate, but for some reason he's also being quite cautious here, warning against the bombing of cultural sites in particular. What do we make of that?
Well, we have had, I think that was a fairly targeted comment to Donald Trump, that the targeting of 52 cultural sites would be ill-advised. But certainly he, Boris Johnson, the UK Prime Minister, has said that he won't shed any tears over the death of General Soleimani, talking about his activities in the region which have destabilised the Middle East. Certainly the attack on coalition sites in recent days, condemning the cycle of violence and putting the activities of Iran right at the heart of that. But we have seen certainly more moderate language used by the EU, who are determined both to issue an invitation to Iran to bring them over here, so that to Brussels, in order that those discussions can take place, to continue to cooperate with friends in Iran and Iraq to preserve the peace. The EU has certainly held back from those specific attacks on General Soleimani, which have been used certainly by the UK Prime Minister and other EU leaders.
So Iran has promised revenge, and I wonder if the Europeans are concerned that some of this revenge might land on their continent, or is this perhaps what's informing some of this caution to make sure that they're not a threat to be in the line of fire with this revenge, whatever it might be, when it comes?
Yes, I mean, if you read between the lines of almost every statement that has come out from a European leader, all are saying really the same thing, bar those specifics about General Soleimani himself and the activities of Iran, where we can see a few divergences, but all calling for de-escalation, saying that a major conflict is in nobody's interest, all calling for the use of diplomacy to reduce tensions, using the NATO alliance, the European Union, which is holding a series of important meetings here in Brussels over the course of this week. We are seeing these very high-level meetings going on both here in Brussels today with Dominic Raab, the UK Foreign Secretary, meeting his French and German counterparts. As I say, the chief EU foreign diplomat has issued that invitation to Iran for his counterpart to visit. Again, all about de-escalation, about the reduction of tensions, for the use of diplomacy as opposed to force. It is in no one's interest, according to any of these foreign powers, for there to be a major conflict in the Middle East. But whether words are enough at this stage, it remains to be seen. It all depends on the nature of the retaliation from Iran, whether it goes through with these threats of a serious retaliation, or whether that is just the use of inflammatory language in response to what was, of course, an inflammatory act on its top major general.
All right, Lucy Hough, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks very much indeed. That's our correspondent, European correspondent in Brussels, giving us a heads up on the movements that are taking place in Europe at the moment regarding this very sensitive issue and developments taking place in the Middle East, particularly Iran, following the death of the military commander